Welcome to the next session of the Cloud Exchange. My guest today is Tom Moore, the Chief Cloud Architect and Engineer for the Federal Civilian Division at GDIT. Tom, thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure to be here.
For this session, we continue the conversation about how the federal national security agencies can take more advantage of cloud services to improve mission effectiveness. As we heard in the last session, Carl Mathias, the U.S. Marshal Service CIO, discussed how he's trying to take maximum advantage of software as a service to rebuild and redesign mission systems. We'll also hear later today from the FBI's Brian Griffith about his four-piece IT modernization strategy that has a goal of moving at least 90% of all systems to the cloud. So, Tom, this is where you come in from GDIT. How, for this broader perspective, for the current state of cloud and national security community, and what opportunities are in the future around cloud. So we're going to start at the very beginning. Where are we with cloud computing? We hear a lot about hybrid. We hear a lot about on-premise and off-premise. But what's the trends you're seeing to give us the state of cloud today?
Yeah, thanks, Jason. So we're seeing cloud adoption accelerate through cloud-first directives, and so too is the need to secure cloud. This is evident in the increasing number of OMB mandates and executive orders to improve cybersecurity while reducing technical debt. Agencies are transitioning out of managing infrastructure and in favor of adopting managed cloud services. Trust in public cloud is growing and more agencies are moving core mission systems to the cloud. This is happening in stages, with low-risk applications moving first as they build cloud foundation capabilities and build confidence in those capabilities, and then move higher-risk applications to the cloud. Automation is everywhere, and DevSecOps is the secure, agile way to deliver it. The business is really catching up to IT's agile ways, and velocity and requests for evolving products and features is growing. In response, automation is used by platform and DevOps teams to build, test, and deploy workloads to the cloud, and new features demanded by the increasing agile business. As agencies move more workloads to the public cloud, the monthly cloud service bills continue to grow and get more complex. In large multi-cloud organizations, automation is required to really ingest all of these bills and deliver actionable information, right, to really drive accountability and continue optimization of those workloads.
A couple key themes I'm hearing, and let's maybe take a half a step back. A lot of folks here manage cloud services as kind of one of those trends. Maybe just give me the 30-second, what do you mean by managed cloud services? How does it work? What are some of just the basics of it?
Sure. So a great example is at the very basic level, infrastructure, right? So organizations traditionally would manage servers in their data center environment. They would manage the racks and all of the dynamics within a data of keeping power and cooling for those servers. So in this case, infrastructure is being offered as a managed service. So the cloud service providers are essentially taking that on, right? They're deploying that infrastructure in their environments, and then it's being consumed by the agencies to deploy workloads.
I think that's really helpful because we've heard so much about managed services or the X as a service, and I think sometimes we get lost in the titles versus what is it really happening here? The other thing you brought up several times was the automation idea, and the importance here is why are we turning to automation? Is it the complexity that kind of this hybrid environment that we're living in is creating?
Yeah, it's a combination of things. One, velocity of change, right? And so to really enable economy of scale, you got to have automation, right, to really manage this growing infrastructure. Staffing, it would take a tremendous amount of staff if you were to try and manually manage that infrastructure in a traditional way as it continues to grow.
I think that's key here because as agencies move more and more to the cloud, like let's take the FBI example that I used at the beginning, 90% of all their applications, and this is just one part of the FBI CGIS, right? The folks in West Virginia, but eventually they can't hire enough people. Like that's why they bring in GDIT or whomever to help out. But again, automation's key here. Is that probably the biggest challenge you're seeing these days as agencies are moving more and more workloads to the cloud?
So I would say the current challenges all tie back to required changes in traditional IT culture and governance. Cloud requires a different governance model, one that balances compliant agile delivery with a self-service catalog. Ideally, each item in the catalog should be built with well-architected framework and reference pattern and utilize policy-based guardrails, all with cost-optimized design and security compliance baked in. Cloud also requires a different capacity planning, forecasting, and budgeting model, and often requires application code refactoring and infrastructure architecture changes to address these cloud differences and deliver cloud value. The cloud financial management practice of Finops really helps address some of these culture and governance challenges to ensure cost optimization upfront with continual monitoring and optimization over the life of a product. Legacy applications are often tightly coupled, making a challenge to migrate to the cloud. Some of those additional challenges would be, when do I choose to re-platform or refactor or replace an application? When you combine that with a hybrid cloud strategy, it's not always clear the best path forward. And without governance helping establish architecture and hosting model preferences and a workload placement policy becomes a real challenge.
I want to go back to something you said because I think it's really important. The capacity plan, the forecast model. A lot of times we get caught up in does this workload work in the cloud? Does it not? Is it factored the right way? Do we need to refactor it? I think though the forecast piece is really important because what we've seen over the time is this idea of, does this specific application fit in which cloud, or does it need to stay on premise and for these reasons? And okay, what's the use? I mean, is that the conversation you're starting to have more and more with agencies around that forecast piece? Okay, what are you really trying to do here with that application in the cloud or on premise?
Yeah, agencies are really trying to adjust this shift from capital expenditure to operating expenditures and really trying to understand what is the run rate from a cloud billing perspective when they move a workload to the cloud so that they can plan accordingly. Cloud with its variable spend and on-demand capabilities have really challenged a lot of agencies initially as to how to actually manage what that budget needs to be. And so having visibility to those run rates and how an application and its use may continue to grow over time is really key to understanding and forecasting budgets.
The visibility is key here because I know we've seen, and I've heard when talking to CIOs across the government, whether national security or civilian agencies or wherever, that they thought, first we'll just lift and shift, put everything in the cloud. Then they're realizing, our run rates are really high, and maybe we need to pull that back on-prem. Now you saw some trends over the last few years of agencies pulling back from the cloud, but now they seem much smarter about this idea of run rates. Is that something that it just took a while to understand how the cloud worked? Is that why we're starting to see this better understanding and getting more visibility?
Yeah, I mean, in the traditional IT data center, right, you would budget based on knowing, hey, I need a server, and your vendor would give you a cost for server and what the storage is. It wasn't at a unit level like you have in cloud, where you're going to pay for specific size and capability, or you're going to pay by the gigabyte, petabyte. So those dynamics have really changed.
I want to shift our conversation toward really the main point of the Cloud Exchange day 2 here, which is around mission, right? How is the mission folks driving toward cloud services? So first of all, does any examples maybe come to mind of some really important ways that agencies are using the cloud to drive toward mission?
Absolutely, Jason. I'm really excited to share a few of those examples with you. So FBI's CGIS division has incrementally migrated and refactored multiple capabilities into their next-gen identification system, which the FBI describes as the world's largest and most efficient electronic repository of biometric and criminal history information. This allowed them to shut down over 1,000 on-premise servers, and they now have the ability to scale up and down as needed. ATF has recently replaced 20-year-old system with a cloud-based unified case management system processing criminal investigations, intelligence gathering efforts, and regulatory inspections. The new system provides instant accessibility across their entire system for users in the office and in the field. And another example is U.S. Marshals. So their capture initiative has been migrating current operational business and mission capabilities to a cloud-based web solution that has enabled new mobile capabilities, operational efficiencies, and internal and external information sharing. Throughout law enforcement, we've seen a growing use of body cameras to capture digital evidence. And use of public cloud services has enabled law enforcement agencies to expand the parameters for recordings and retention and improve the chain of custody enforcement and reporting.
All three are very good examples. In fact, we heard from the U.S. Marshal Service just previously, and we're going to hear from Brian Griffith from CJIS later, so more details on that. One of the things that I heard you say, though, is that the cloud services that they're using are really driving towards better, well, we'll use the, unfortunately, term effectiveness and efficiency, which I always try to avoid because it gets a little bit overused. But is that the biggest benefit to mission, is that all of a sudden things are a little bit easier, the data's there, the access to the systems are there? I mean, is that the benefit we're really talking for the mission side?
Yeah, you know, the mission is constantly being disrupted with different challenges, and cloud on-demand capability really starts to offer that reaction time to being able to respond to those kinds of changes.
And I think the response time is really important, because I remember Carl Mathias, for the CIO at U.S. Marshal Service, talking about, you know, this idea of, well, I have to wait to go back to the car, or wait to go back to the building to look something up or put in some data. Now that can be happened through a handheld device or some other, and this gets us down the path of kind of the edge computing as well. I think that's the other big benefit that we're starting to see is that that's where the value comes in, is that this idea of at the edge.
Yeah, there's a growing trend. This hybrid cloud is really pushing out to the edge, enabling folks, as you mentioned, in the field in particular, and also enabling new capabilities in the data center.
As services are being pushed to the edge, we talked a little bit about the need for instance, handheld devices, or you have to go back to the building to access a system. That's one value to the mission side. I imagine there's more value that the mission side is getting from this access to the data, to the applications through the cloud. What else are you hearing or seeing among your customers?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it really echoes the concerns that we've heard from CFOs and IT leaders. You know, in response, agencies are following a structured approach to adopting cloud services. You know, for existing applications in particular, you know, they start by rationalizing their application portfolio to really reduce the number of applications to even consider migrating to the cloud. You know, then they assess an application's readiness or technical readiness using a set of criteria while considering potential risk and value, and then develop a roadmap and schedule for migrating applications. And finally, you know, they develop a business case with a multi-year total cost of ownership based on cloud-optimized target architectures and the one-time migration costs. The final report then would show a payback period and ongoing savings to really justify the migration and set expectations for value to be monitored. Now, once in the cloud, agencies are monitoring utilization and billing using Finops, as I mentioned earlier. And Finops brings together this collaboration of IT, finance, and business to really drive cost accountability and aligns with the DevOps delivery model. Finops promotes this continuous life cycle of monitoring and optimization of cloud services and helps detect unexpected spending trends, and especially if there are unexpected anomalies, you can detect those before you get budget overruns. And this partnership really ensures that value delivered meets the business expectation while aligning the spend with actual usage.
You've brought up the term FinOps several times. I think it's actually maybe a new term for me, which I'm excited to learn. Maybe let's put a better, it's financial operations, or am I combining the wrong things there? What when you talk about FinOps and how it relates to DevSecOps, connect my dots for me a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So I touched on it a little bit. FinOps is really this practice. It's a life cycle when you execute it, but it brings together a new sort of partnership between IT, finance, and the business. You know, these are all key stakeholders in trying to leverage that cloud journey and trying to fund that cloud journey, right? It recognizes that we're putting technical engineers and architects kind of in the driver's seat of our budget spending, right? Because as they're adjusting how they're delivering application in agile ways, again, cloud is predominantly on-demand billing. So as they're making those changes, it's impacting your bill. So Finops really recognizes that it's really building this discipline around that partnership and making sure that cost optimization is top of mind, and we're doing it over the life cycle. It's not a one-time thing. You're going to continue to be monitoring, making sure that your technical team that's working on it is participating and really trying to drive this shared accountability.
That's a really helpful explanation, because I think so many times we talk DevSecOps and, oh, well, you got to bring the business people in with the tech people and they got to look over the shoulders, but they forget that longer tail of that application, meaning as you continue to make changes, as you move things to the cloud, there's a cost there. And I think a lot of maybe agencies aren't recognizing that cost, or they recognize the cost after the fact when they're like, uh-oh, do we have the money for it? Is that why this concept of Finops is maybe starting to gain some traction?
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of your early adopters had IT leaders wake up in the middle of the night with a significant cloud bill that they weren't expecting, because elements of their environment wasn't really designed with cost optimization in mind. So this has really helped to develop this kind of a discipline.
I'm interested to see how it continues along, because I think a lot of, as DevOps and DevSecOps continues to grow in government, they'll need that type of approach. So thank you. I've learned something new. I'm excited now. Hopefully our audience did too. Tom, we're talking a lot about how the mission side is starting to see the value. The other thing that's adding value to the mission side is the use of new tools around artificial intelligence, machine learning, predictive analytics. I want to call them emerging technologies, but I think we've been talking about them long enough now that they're here. They're just technologies. What are you starting to see about some of the tools that these national security or other agencies are using to really, again, we'll go back to that value question to the mission?
Yeah, absolutely. Agencies are building cloud-native data warehouse to really ingest this high volume of often real-time data streams into data lakes while generating near real-time intelligence. Data exchanges are built on top of these curated virtual data marts to support information sharing and consumption across agencies, divisions, and data scientists. AI is used to really help correlate data points across these data lakes and virtual data warehouses. And machine learning is helping to reduce time to improve accuracy for identification of adversaries and threats from digital data sources. Another tool used to improve mission success is in the use of chaos engineering, to build more resilient critical systems to address unknown and unexpected events, while improving the intelligence and system performance and service level monitoring to counter attacks and various types of system disruptions. So chaos engineering is really helping agencies learn to use AI and predictive analytics to help detect these early symptoms of potential service disruptions and to trigger automated responses to mitigate the disruption and maintain system availability.
I love the term chaos engineering. I'm learning more every day now. Another term I can start talking about. Let me ask you though around it, because it seems like a lot of what you're describing is just what people have been talking about with SD-WAN, that same concept. Real-time understanding of your network, make changes as you see it. Are they related? Is SD-WAN part of chaos engineering? Is it just, it's a little curveball maybe for you.
Yeah, no, chaos engineering is looking at, critical systems holistically and really looking at what are the potential things that could go wrong and really testing your design and its resiliency, perhaps in new ways, right? It's really stressing, go beyond your traditional ways you might try and test your environment and really think about your architecture, I should say your high availability architecture in new ways. The idea here is you want your critical applications to be sustaining their availability and capabilities if you're under an attack, or if a critical component of your infrastructure fails. You want to make sure that you've got a good design that can be resilient and maintain availability, and that's really what the idea is behind chaos engineering. And so SD-WAN is just one of the many technologies that might play a role in the testing of your system.
Okay. Thanks for that explanation. Again, new terms are great, but we're going to make sure people understand what they mean. For the last few minutes of our segment here, I want to make sure we talk about security, because you cannot have a conversation, right, on cloud, on data, on applications without security. So first of all, we know that the national security systems, the national security folks really care about the security side more than more than anyone else. Are you starting to see some trends? Are you seeing a more, if you will, alleviation of fears from the cloud and security? Are these national security agencies in better shape or more comfortable?
Yeah, cloud service providers are really at the front line of delivering as-a-service technology innovation, really enabling agencies to quickly respond to changing mandates and executive orders to secure the critical infrastructure. Example would be the May executive order on improving the nation's cybersecurity. It calls for bold changes, not incremental improvements, and has a very aggressive schedule. So some components of that are better sharing of threat intelligence data between agencies like the Cyber Infrastructure and Security Agency, the FBI, and the Intel community. It calls for modernizing security capabilities with zero trust architecture, centralizing cybersecurity data for analytics and risk assessment. Now these are just a few of the areas the executive order focuses on, where on-demand cloud capabilities can really help agencies meet this aggressive schedule. And for dealing with security risks like ransomware, many of the components in the executive order I just described will help improve security posture and preparedness for dealing with ransomware attacks. Two of the biggest is zero trust architecture and having centralized logging and observability for threat detection. Now, there are additional approaches that can be considered, such as having a continuous ATO, an event-driven configuration and security posture management, along with detective guardrails. And as basic as it sounds, have good backups that you have tested and protect those backups with immutability. And finally, consider shifting from patch management to immutable workloads that get built using CI/CD automation. This ensures any unknown compromises due to exploited vulnerabilities are removed on a frequent basis.
The one thing that I want to maybe tag back to the beginning on is when we were talking about managed services, a lot of the tools that you talk about, and whether it's a continuous ATO or the immutability piece, can come from that managed service. Is that why it's a lot of agencies are starting to look at this as a really important piece to their hybrid environment, that managed service side, because of the security benefits that come with it?
Absolutely. Managed services comes with your provider actually owning a lot of the security upkeep of those services. So that is a critical reason why managed services are being adopted.
We got to make sure we hit upon this, because this is really important, that it's a shared responsibility, right? It's not just throw it over the fence and hey, GDIT, make sure we're secure, right? I think that's one of the things that sometimes cloud services get a poor, people get a bad experience with, because all of a sudden they're like, well, I thought you were going to secure us, right? I mean, are you having those conversations with clients a little bit about, hey, this is our responsibility together?
Yeah, I think that's really where we can help agencies navigate some of those challenges and bring some of the expertise. It is a shared responsibility model, and the cloud service provider only owns a portion of it. The other end of it is how you actually use that managed service. And so it's key to understand those dynamics and really make sure you've got a team that's trained well with that particular managed service, can make sure it's being utilized in accordance with compliance best practices.
You mentioned ransomware, and I think that's something that's been on the top of our minds right over the last couple months here, as we've seen just the increase in attacks. I read a statistic recently is ransomware is up something effective like 300 or 400% over the last year. So is there a piece for the cloud to play in terms of helping these agencies, whether national security agencies and others, homeland security agencies, to address the challenges of ransomware and other similar cyber threats?
Yeah, cloud brings, we talked about managed services, right? It brings a lot of security service offerings as well that really help agencies to secure the environment and actually thwart attacks. So many of these security services can be layered on top of your cloud services to really help defend your environment.
And I think that's the key piece, is it's the layered approach. We used to hear defense in depth, and it was always talking about like the castle, the moat, right?
That's
now
right.
it's a different type of defense in depth, because it's the layers within your data, within the cloud, within your on-premise. So I think we're seeing it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, you think about a typical environment, you know, you're protecting the operating system, you're protecting your application, and then we put elements of cloud managed services in front of it. You've got a load balancer that you can enable some additional security capabilities, and then you can even put another front door in front of that with content delivery networks can add additional layers of protection to your environment. So as you mentioned, a layered approach to security is essential.
And it will continue to be essential as more and more agencies move to the cloud. Tom, we're just about out of time before I let you go. I've enjoyed our conversation, and really what this all comes down to is creating a foundation, if you will, for these national security and homeland security agencies to not just move to the cloud, which is a nice goal, but really to change the way that mission delivery happens. Explain maybe a little bit more about why this foundation is so important.
Yeah. Having a solid cloud foundation capabilities is really pivotal to your cloud adoption journey. Agencies are moving systems for core mission capabilities to the cloud and building solid cloud foundation capabilities with CJIS compliant reference architectures and FedRAMP authorized services. They are enabling cloud adoption at scale by standing up Cloud Center of Excellence. This capability is really essential to identify, prioritize, and implement these critical cloud foundation capabilities in areas such as cybersecurity, networking, operations, and cloud financial management. To future-proof these capabilities, the trend is to adopt cloud-native architectures like microservices and platform managed services like Kubernetes and function as a service to really harness the innovation being provided by cloud service providers. Agencies are transforming their data centers into edge locations by bringing public cloud infrastructure into their on-premise and co-location facilities. Technologies like AWS Outpost and Azure Stack, which gives them this common control plane to really deliver managed infrastructure as a service and platform as a service capability.
You opened the door to a ton more discussion. Unfortunately, we are out of time for today, so we'll have you back on and continue our conversation another time. But let me thank my guest. Tom Moore is the Chief Cloud Architect and Engineer for the Federal Civilian Division at GDIT. Tom, thank you so much for the conversation today.
My pleasure to be here.
I'm Jason Miller. Now let's rejoin the studio for more from the Cloud Exchange on Federal News Network.